Hi everyone, welcome to an illustration loving, kidlit loving edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Love the visual, love books, love engaging readers, and on this episode, I'm glad to be talking with author, illustrator Aaron Zenz. Aaron, thank you for jumping in, joining, and talking with me.
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks so much, Jason, for the invitation.
My pleasure. Thanks for saying yes, and thank you for bringing the ducktail shirt as well as
Oh,
the lovely assembly of books behind you. Always like a
yeah.
good shelfie.
Yeah, this is my happy place.
Nice, nice. I also see, is that some of your framed artwork back there that
It
you're
is. Yeah,
nice?
a handful of things. I've got lots of fun stuff all around the room. Toys and knickknacks and art and yeah, those are a handful of images, not from any book related things, but just some fun art adventures that had with my kids back in the day. So I would look at their drawings that they had made, and then I would try to reimagine them kind of in my illustrator style as a gift for them, and then somehow they ended up in my own studio. So they
Love it.
they had them for a lot of years themselves, and then they started, getting shuffled around, and I was like, well, you know what? I'm gonna have those back instead of just them being in a closet. So
Yeah, yeah. Love it, love it. Love the visual shout out. Love the family connections there. Awesome. Yeah. You've created a variety of titles. You are both singular author and illustrator, as well as illustrator on titles that other folks have written.
mhm.
A couple of those of your own being, I'm going to make sure that I try to pronounce this correctly.
All right,
Hiccupotamus,
good
hiccup.
job.
Thank
Yeah.
you, thank you. Huggable, which is fun to say. The first time I read that title, I was like, "Well, that's an interesting title," and then I said it out loud, and I was like, "Oh yeah, okay." And I'm gonna try to pronounce this one and give it full justice. I love you,
Yes.
you,
Yeah.
as in EWE.
Yeah.
And then you have work, as I mentioned, that you've done with the authors. They're sort of writing the words and you're writing the pictures. The spaghetti slurping sewer serpent, which is fun
There
to
you
say.
go.
Yeah,
Yeah, you've had a workout already in the
that's
short
right.
time.
I'm like Ron Burgundy in the mirror over here. It's
Yeah.
amazing. It's amazing. So what connected you with books and writing, drawing, and creating?
Yeah, it just has always been a joyful activity for me, from the time I was a kid on up, just never stopped. For me, drawing and creating, come up with characters and stories and making pictures, for me, that was like play. Um,
Mhm.
I would run around the neighborhood with the neighborhood kids as well and ride my bike and played all the sports, those things that most kids do. I did all of that as well. But on top of that, I just found a lot of enjoyment, a lot of pleasure in drawing and creating in books and story. I enjoyed television a lot, but probably in a different kind of way than most kids would have. Like I was really dissecting story and enjoying character arcs and all those things even before I knew what any of that was. Um, and so, yeah, that was just always something that I was drawn to as far as what I was consuming, but then also as an activity, as enjoyment for myself. And time went on, and I just found that I could keep doing that and make
Mhm.
a living at it. And so here we are. So
Love it.
it's been a smooth transition from the time of childhood until to me doing this as an adult, and there was never really a point where, I thought I'm gonna be an artist and I'm
Mhm.
gonna start now. It wasn't like that. It was just a very continuous line.
Nice, nice. But it sounds like a lot of fun, and it sounds like hopefully you've continued to find the play in the work that you do. It certainly,
Oh,
at
yeah.
least going through the titles, looking through the work seems that way. So, uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. A lot of fun. I'm drawn to things that are very nonsensical, playing around with words, as you can tell from the titles of those. And yeah, for me, it's all very enjoyable.
yeah, yeah. No, you mentioned parenting as well.
Yeah.
Curious about, as an author, illustrator, parent, what some of those things are that you would like kids to get from your books and to kind of take with them.
I hope that they play as well. I mean,
Yeah,
for me,
yeah.
as I'm creating things, it's a joyful experience. It's how I have fun. It's how it's one of the things that brings me joy in life. And so I'm hoping on the other end that's the case for readers as well, and teachers and parents or anybody who's interacting with the books. When I was in college, I did take a class on children's literature. And I believe the title of the book we used was something along the lines of like the pleasure of children's books or children's literature.
Hmm.
Um, and I guess so, since that time on, that's just sort of the lens through which I've looked at the picture book world is this idea of pleasure. And, books can do a whole lot more in addition to that. They can be educational, they can help you think about new things or see the world in different ways. And all of that's great. But for me, the prime starting place is the joy of all of that world. Uh, Either creating new worlds myself or taking joy in the worlds that other people have dreamed up. For me, it starts with the pleasure, and then anything else is, bonus on top of that. And I think that's a great way to get kids, if you have reluctant readers or even if you want to, in the classroom teach things. A great starting point is from the enjoyment spot, and then some of the education can come along. I think you have much more success in teaching somebody something if they're enjoying the process.
Hmm.
If
Hmm.
you start, with the heavy hand or the hey, we're gonna learn something today approach.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I didn't want to lead you into saying that fun was what you were after, but I kind of thought that that might be where the conversation goes. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and it's great now that I can make a living um, doing something that I would be doing for enjoyment anyways. If I had some
Hmm.
factory job or whatever and I wanted to come home and unwind, I'd probably be doodling or drawing or writing. And so the fact that I can do that as the major workload of my day, that's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as somebody that's crafted, you've worked with folks, you've kind of done the solo author artist combo kind of thing. Uh, Anything that you've learned that you've gained so far in the process of writing for young people in particular?
I'm sure there's a lot that I've learned. It's hard to articulate. Like I don't know that I've had any kind of like major revelation moments, but I know that as time goes on, I'm always growing, I'm always learning. What I'm creating is always developing. I guess maybe one of the sort of a sideways way to answer that is one of the fun family things we did for a number of years is for a period of about 7 years, our family ran a book review blog called Bookie Woogie.
Ah,
And
yeah. Hmm.
um, yeah, and it's been a while. The kids are all kind of grown up now. But back in the day when we were running this thing, what we would do is we would sit down once a week with a book. Maybe it was a picture book we had gotten from the library or a chapter book that we had been reading together as a bedtime story over the course of weeks or days and had finished it up that week. And then I'd sit down with the kids and just ask them kind of probing questions to see what things they enjoyed about the book. And then I would type up the whole conversation afterward, post it to the blog. We would always make fan art accompanying every post we made. And there was a number of motivators for that. Not high on the list at all, had anything to do with me and my books. I really wanted that to take a back seat to the whole endeavor.
Hmm.
But it was fun to just, look at and celebrate great books that our favorite authors and illustrators were making, and to pick those apart. And as the kids would ask questions, then I could kind of weave in just different things that I knew about art and writing, and a lot of the things that I had been doing and continue to do kind of at a intuitive level, it was forcing me to kind of bring all those thoughts to the front of my mind and say, hey, why is this picture working as well as it does? And
Hmm.
we talk about composition and white space and um, alliteration when we're talking through, the text and all that fun stuff. And so, not that I was necessarily learning through that process, but it really made me, it kind of cemented things that maybe I didn't even realize that I was doing when I was making my own art. It's kind of like, oh yeah, that's what I do when I make pictures.
Yeah.
And so it got me to think through all of those things. So I know that I grew a lot over the years while we were doing that as a fun family activity. But yeah, every new book brings its own challenges. I really think about illustrating and writing as kind of puzzle solving.
Mm-hmm.
The choices that you're making basically are just solving little puzzles that present themselves as you're trying to, make this story coherent and as you're trying to make illustrations that are effective. There's all sorts of little problems that arise and many options of how to approach those. And so yeah, so every book I do, I'm sure I'm growing and learning and changing through that process.
Cool. Yeah, very cool. And as you're talking about all of these things, it's interesting how some of that almost seems intuitive in a way, as a creator, which I'm sure it's really not. I'm sure that those are things that people have to pick up on in a lot of cases. But then just how simple people kind of perceive picture books and children's books to be, but how they're really complex. There's a lot of thought, a lot of planning, and a lot of design that goes into that.
Yeah, and then if you're doing it well, all of that's invisible. It's like you
Uh-huh.
don't see all of the hurdles and the puzzles and the way things could have gone wrong. And if you are noticing something, it's probably because it did go wrong.
Right.
You don't want to have those things jumping out at people. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. Um, well, curious about those moments, school visits, things like that, or readings where you get the chance to interact with readers, or if there's something that comes in the mail or online, any sort of fun, interesting interactions that you've had with kids out there that are enjoying the books.
Yeah, that's always the best. Making picture books tends to be a very isolated, you're alone in a room drawing all day long at your table. Uh,
Hmm.
so it's a very solitary activity. And so those handful of opportunities you have to get out and interact, in particular with kids, are you live for those. So school visits are great. Like that's one of the that's the highlight of my year is school visit season, which we're just getting to the other end of. So it's mid-April right now, and so March being reading month, that's usually the where the schools will in bulk want you to come in and do visits then. So yeah, I always enjoy that. And it's always, question and answer time is my favorite part of those visits, interacting with the kids, and then you get to go off script a little bit, and with the fun things that they come up with. Um, and those are growing and learning times too, like getting that kind of feedback. It goes both ways. I'm there when I do a school visit, my main goal is not by the end of the school visit for kids to walk away and know a bunch of Aaron Zenz facts.
Hmm.
If I walk away and they completely forget everything about me, but they're excited to go out and draw, or they're excited to go out and make a book, tell a story, then it's like, mission accomplished. So,
Yeah, yeah.
so I see that as my role there of just trying to get the creative wheels rolling and see if there's any kind of inspiration that I can provide for the room full of kids, and then it works the other way too, like through the conversations we have, through their energy, through the excitement and the exchanges, that fuels me to be excited to run back and keep working on things. So in general, sometimes in very specific ways. So probably the neatest example of something that just kept bouncing back and forth and growing and growing. I have a book called Monsters Go Night Night, uh,
Hmm.
which I did a number of years ago. And when it came time to make the illustrations for that book, I was super excited because I love, we've already established I love nonsense, and you can't get much more nonsense than monsters, which are just, a mishmash of horns and tails and claws and wings. And, it's like, it's great. It's pure creativity and imagination. So I was really excited when that project got greenlit, and I knew I was going to be able to create a whole cast of characters. Um, but when that came time to actually sit down and design them all, um, I realized like I almost didn't have a starting point. It's like, oh, it was almost too much freedom and too much creativity, because it's like I literally couldn't draw anything right now, and it's a monster. So like, where do I even start? Where do I begin? It was almost like I said, too much freedom. It was kind of paralyzing. And I thought back to a big stack of drawings that I had from my son Elijah. Years earlier, when he was about 4 or 5, he would draw monsters constantly, and I just loved his imagination and the wild diversity and the kinds of monsters he was drawing. So I just saved them all because anytime I found them, just because I loved them so much. And I thought, man, how cool would that be if all of the characters in this book were based off of his little kid monster drawings? And so I kind of like with art on the wall there. That was something I had done even before that. And so probably with that in mind, it was like, well, why don't I do my own spin on these characters that my son had made? And so, yeah, so all the characters in that book are based off of monster drawings that he had made when he was little. And so then I share that story at some school visits at the year that the book came out. And we talk about monsters and creativity and drawing, and it's really cool for the kids to see the, little kid designs being turned into characters in a book. Um,
Hmm.
then I close that presentation by again trying to get the kids to think creatively, and so I share a game that we play as a family where somebody makes a scribble or a doodle, and you hand it to the person next to you, and they turn it into a cat or a house or a rocket ship or whatever. Uh,
Hmm.
but because we've been talking about monsters, the challenge is, can I turn it into a monster? So a kid comes up and makes a scribble on a big pad of paper, and I turn it into a monster. And so that's how I close that presentation. And so a few weeks after doing that school visit, I got this big packet in the mail. And it was from Hudsonville Christian School in Michigan. And the teacher there, Mary Jo Stahl, or she was the librarian, school librarian, had all the kids make thank you notes for me,
Uh-huh.
presentation I had given. And she had taken a cue from that ending activity. So she had made a handful of doodles that the kids could pick from. And then they turned the doodle into a monster and then wrote a thank you note next to it. So I had this big pack of like, I don't know what it was, like 350 monster drawings that were just amazing. I mean, they were the coolest things, designs. It was just like, it was pure joy just going through every single one of those. And I just didn't want the story to end there. It was like it was this cool gift. And I couldn't imagine that the next thing I do with these is just like, okay, now they just go in a drawer and I never look at them again. But like I couldn't think of like, well, what would I do with them? I don't know. Because I had the thing with my son in mind, I was like, do I pull out a couple and redraw these monsters in my style and send it back to the school, kind of like a thank you for their thank you? I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and then I was talking with a buddy of mine at another school visit about a big art competition that takes place every year in Grand Rapids, Michigan, close to where I live. And it was just talking about how I didn't really have any ideas for for an art entry into this thing. But then I thought, you know what? Like that would be maybe that's how this other thing lives on. It
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
I wonder how many of those drawings I could reimagine in my own style over the summer and then enter that as an entry into the art competition. And so I jumped on it. Over the summer, I started just cranking out drawings. Got permission from the school first.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and over the course of the summer, did close to 100
Wow.
uh, reimaginings of those kids' drawings in my own style, entered the art competition, and then over the 2 or 3 weeks that art show goes on, I invited kids to keep adding monster designs into the pool that I was drawing from. So I had a little basket where kids could add more drawings. I ended up having 10,000 drawings
Oh,
that kids
wow.
had made. That sounds like me making up like an insane number, but like that's literally what it was. There were 10,000 monster drawings kids had made. And I was able to do
Wow.
another 50 over the course of those 2 or 3 weeks, and then just kept adding to this big art display that was in the window. And it's the world's largest art competition. There's around, I don't know, I think it's like 1,700 entries every year, or that year. And in the four categories, this entry came in second place out of all
Wow.
the entries that were in that category. And unfortunately, you don't get anything for getting second place. Only the first place entry wins anything. But it was just so cool to see how excited the were.
Yeah.
And they're sitting on the spot drawing with my colored pencils, and they're seeing art added to the display every day, and they're running over and they're drawing monsters and submitting them. Um, and just the cool stories that just came out of that about kids going home and being excited to keep making monsters. And I actually did that 2 years in a row. I did the same concept the second year, all new monsters. So I drew another 150 monsters for that. And there was a family that came back, and they said, "Oh, we're so glad you're here again. Our son had entered a monster last year, and it didn't get picked. You know, it wasn't one of the ones that you chose to have up on the display. So we were a little
Mhm.
sad, but that's fine. But he was so inspired by that that he went home and he's drawn a monster every single day for the
Wow.
entire past year. And he brought this binder because he wanted to show you. He was hoping you would be here again. And so we just flipped through it, and it was so cool. It was like all these, he had them all categorized by different species, and like these are the water monsters, and these are the woodland monsters, and it was just so cool to see that. And like if I hadn't been back there that second year, like that's a story that still would have existed. I just wouldn't have known anything about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so like that's really how I see how creativity works is just sort of like this. I describe it like a big volleyball that we just bounce back and forth
Hmm. Hmm.
firing each other. So it started with, my son Elijah's drawings that most people would pick up and be like, that's kind of cool, all right, chuck it, like it had its time. But he made something that inspired me to make something, that inspired that school class to make something, that inspired me to make this big display, which then inspired other kids to go out and make stuff. And so
Hmm.
it's just, like this neat bouncing back and forth, and just creativity and joy, and the fact that it's monsters, it's this wide open world of creativity that you can't mess up. Because that's the other thing I talk about at schools is, if I'm drawing an aircraft carrier, I better know what an aircraft carrier looks like. But with
Hmm.
a monster, you can't mess it up. Nobody can ever come up to me and say like, "Oh, that doesn't look like a monster."
That's true. Very true.
And yeah, just to see the kids get excited, so excited about making things that no matter what they put down on the paper is legitimate. You know, like that's a monster exactly how it looks. You know, there's no
Yeah.
right or wrong answer. So
Love that. Yeah, I love the low risk of that, and I also love that like mentorship interaction with you and the kids creating. That's very, very cool. Very
yeah,
cool. And memorable for everybody that got to be part of that as well.
I think so. Yeah, yeah. And another chance for me to like, I might be the starting point of why somebody might come up to that
Hmm.
exhibit, but then hopefully the spotlight's turned really quickly away from me and it's inspiring the kids to go out and do things and make things. And one other
Yeah.
little fun story that came out of that was one of the days when I was sitting there drawing, there was always like a gaggle of like 10, 15, 20 kids over at the table drawing monsters and submitting them. And so I was drawing, and a little kid had come over and was watching me draw, a very quiet kid.
Hmm.
And so I was trying to strike up some conversation. I said, "Oh, you know, like, did you already go over and make a monster yet?" And just kind of, shook his head. And I said, "Oh, are you gonna do it in a minute?" And he just shook his head again. And I said, "Oh, how come?" And he's like, I can't draw. And I said, "Oh, okay. Well, the thing though about monsters is like monsters can look like anything. You know, there's no right or wrong answer.
Hmm.
Anything you put down is gonna be an amazing monster because you can't mess it up." And his eyes lit up and he raced over to the table and just started drawing away. And I mean, it was so cool. It was just so
Yeah.
cool to be able to see kids get excited like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So awesome. That is awesome. And uh, love it. The story continues. The creating
Yeah.
continues. Yeah.
Yeah. And who knows? I mean, one of those kids will, I'm sure, make something that I might not see, but somebody else will see. And they'll
Hmm.
be excited and that'll give them an idea and they'll make something. Somebody else will see that and they'll make something and it may bounce around the world and come back and someday I'll see something and I'll be like, that's cool. That gives me an idea for a project. And I'll have no
Hmm.
idea that it's still part of this continual cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Love it. Well, in terms of the cycle, the last question I usually ask is what's next? What's upcoming? What currently has your creative attention? And then I always like to tag in where people can go if they want to see more and explore what you're creating.
Yeah, so I just wrapped up over the last about 3 years. I was working on a series of 12 books about a little otter character named Otter B.
Hmm. Hmm.
Those are done, 12 books in that series. So now I'm at the point where I'm launching into whatever's next. So I'm working up dummies and manuscripts, and those are out. Publishers are looking at those. My reps shopping those around. So whatever gets greenlit next is the next thing that's on my plate. So I'm having fun doing that. Just getting back to those beginning pure creativity brainstorming stage is always my favorite part of that. Um, and then as far as where people can find me, anywhere I'm at, it's just my name, Aaron Zenz. I don't have any, weird, funny handles. So my website's aaronzenz.com. Just redesigned that around a year ago and slowly adding the pieces there. So new sections are being added to that all the time. And then, Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and Twitter and all those places, it's just Aaron Zenz. So if anybody wants to see anything, that's where you can find me.
Awesome, awesome. Well, looking forward to the things that are on the way. I'm sure the inspiration will continue.
Yeah.
And glad to have you back anytime to talk about creating. I'm always up for a conversation about art and storytelling and creating.
Yeah, super. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much.